Game Builder Studio.
You now have the ability to add Facebook authentication and Graph API calls to your Game Builder Studio games. You'll first need to set up your application here on the Facebook website and get an application ID. This Facebook plugin works across iOS, Android, as well as web browser games published from Game Builder Studio. We'll just start creating a new application by selecting iOS. I'll give it test mobile game. Create new Facebook app ID. We're not going to create a test version for now, but you can. Give it a category of games. Call it action. Create app ID. Now, once this is done, Facebook gives you a number of getting started guides and things like that. But all you need to do is skip the quick start, and you'll have your application ID right up here. And you have an app secret that can be used on any server scripts or backend applications that you run to do secure requests to the Facebook for your Facebook application. Well, we don't need any of that. We just need the app ID, and then you will also go to settings and add a platform. So we'll add iOS, and you'll add Android. Now the information for these different options will be apparent to you later on. I'll show you where to get the bundle ID information that you need, as well as the hash key for the Android platform. I have an application, a demo application here, to show you what you're going to do with your application ID. So once you have that application ID, you can come over to Game Builder Studio, and I have a Facebook action where you will paste the app key. This is just a simple input field, so you don't need to put quotes around it. You only need to do that in expression input fields. And we're going to do a basic login, and you have the default permissions that every app has from Facebook. And on response of a successful login, we're going to load an image and display it here on the screen. Now, if I launch this, it'll open up in the default flash display window, but you'll notice that if I click login, nothing happens. It doesn't work in this environment, in this flash player window. In order for the Facebook authentication to work, it either needs to be in the browser environment with the Facebook SDK loaded, or it needs to be on a mobile device where we package the Facebook SDK with the game in order to bring up the Facebook login UI. So in order for this to actually be demoed to you and for it to work, you're going to need to set up a local server on your machine. Now you can do that however you want. There's a lot of tutorials on the internet to figure that out. But once you have that local server running, you need to also give it a virtual host that has a particular URL, because in the publish settings, you can change the launch type of your Game Builder Studio game. So you can launch it directly in the Flash player in the browser, directly accessing the HTML file that Game Builder Studio generates, or in the browser with a custom URL, which is what we're going to need to do in order to get this to work in the browser. And I've given it a dummy domain address that I've pointed to my local host, and Facebook demo.html is the default HTML file that is generated by Game Builder Studio once you build your game. Inside of build, you'll notice you have your generated Swift as well as a default HTML file, and you have the JS libraries that are required to communicate with Facebook. Now, I created a local host with the domain games.gamebuilderstudio.com that points directly to the build folder on my local machine for my Game Builder Studio project, because it's easier to just point here and launch it and test. But you could very well deploy this build folder to a remote server and that has a certain domain name and launch your game that way and test it that way. Now this domain name is going to have to be added inside of the settings for your Facebook app in order for your game to actually authenticate and launch the Facebook UI to log in. So we'll also have to add the website platform, and this is where we would paste the custom URL. Okay, now that I have that custom domain added, I'll show you where to get the bundle ID information. For your Android games, your bundle ID, well, this is also true for your iOS games as well. Your bundle ID is here. It's normally in the format of a domain, backwards domain URL. So this is the bundle ID that you're going to use to copy over to your settings for Facebook. Now it's important to realize that with Game Builder Studio, we use the underlying Adobe Air SDK, and it adds for the Android platform, it adds Air in front of, or it tacks it onto the front of the bundle ID once it does the final packaging. So you'll need to add Air in front of that bundle ID, and the class name will be Air dot your bundle ID dot app entry. And now you also need a hash key. Now this hash key is a combination or a generated string that combines some information from your certificate and the password and the device ID of your Android device. So this would require you to do some terminal, open up your terminal and run OpenSSL, but we built it into the settings window here. So you just simply pass your certificate information and hit generate. So here's the warning. A certificate and password is required. So because we haven't actually launched or published the Android build yet, and we're using a self-signed certificate here, it hasn't created the certificate yet. So I'll actually do a publish here just so it does one initial build. Okay, now that that's complete, the certificate should have been, a default certificate should have been created. And I've output it here to the release folder. So now I have a default self-signed certificate. And if I hit generate hash, there we go. So we just need to copy this over to the hash key slot. And like I said, the bundle ID will be that same string for iOS as well. I'll paste that there. And we don't have any of the App Store information yet because it's not actually published on the App Store, but this would be sufficient for you to test. And I'll just show that to you quick here I have another profile here for iOS settings. That is my bundle ID for iOS and for Android. So I've kept them the same. You can save that. Yes, use this package name. And now I should be good to test on both of those platforms, iOS, Android, as well as in the browser. Now I'm going to log the user in. Once they've successfully logged in, I'm going to make an API call to grab, it's going to be a graph API call to grab the currently logged in user's picture. And I'm going to display that picture on an image renderer in Game Builder Studio. So I'll cover more in detail of making Facebook API calls in a later video. But for now, let's just launch this. And it does launch in the browser with my custom domain name that I've added to my Facebook settings. Now if I hit login, you should see the dialog prompt. I'll do a successful login. It'll tell me what permissions I'm granting. Hit yes, play now, and voila, the image is loaded. So it's very simple to use. This same login flow is used across the browser as well as mobile devices, and it's fairly easy to add to your app.